Hello there, this is Linda Hill reporting from Down Under, reporting from Australia, reporting about things astrological and Sabian symbol. So we've got Easter coming up this weekend, and it's a pretty amazing time, and through the agency of the Sabian symbols I saw some things that I thought I would like to report in on. One of those things that I saw, what I'm seeing, that is highly visible, is that Saturn is on an Easter degree at the moment. Saturn is on the 17th degree of Sagittarius, and that is an Easter sunrise service draws a large crowd. And one might wonder what that might mean. Well, you know, it definitely talks about the hope and the joy of resurrection of some sort. You know, we might feel the need to come together with community, to share with family, to celebrate, whether we're Christian or not. You know, that can still be part of the symbolism of this weekend, of Easter weekend. I find it rather extraordinary that Elsie Wheeler, when she gave birth to the Sabian symbols in 1925, you know, that was Mark Evan Jones called that an experiment, and it was certainly a double-blind experiment. Neither Elsie Wheeler nor Mark Evan Jones knew what phrase, the Sabian symbols are a phrase, was being put with what degree of the zodiac. And here we are, you know, at Easter weekend, and Saturn is on an Easter sunrise service that draws a large crowd. That is Sagittarius 17. In the zodiac, that means Sagittarius 16 plus. You always add one to get the accurate Sabian symbol. So that's pretty, I find that to be pretty amazing. You know, it's Saturn's on the Easter degree. And I guess it means many things. And you know, it's Saturn in Sagittarius on the, you know, the Easter degree. It's drawing large crowds. And of course, we're seeing that across the United States in terms of this political you know, the political gatherings, you know, people coming together to voice their political opinions. And of course, as it's Saturn, you know, it can bring up division between people. You know, I believe in this, you believe in that, and I'm right, you're wrong, or you're wrong, you're right, and I'm wrong, or whatever it happens to be. You know, Sagittarius can be like that. Of course, Sagittarius can be very accepting of differences between people. That, of course, is part of the equation. But it depends on which side of the thing, you know, that we're experiencing. I do think that we're seeing a lot of divisions through the agency of that Saturn. But we can feel the resurrection. We can feel that we are reviving our hopes and our dreams. You know, we can really sit with that. And if we've done our work, you know, Saturn can bring us great rewards. I just find it, the reason I felt to make this video is because this weekend, Venus is on another Easter degree. There's only 2 Easter degrees in the whole of the 360. I find it extraordinary that there's another one, and it is Pisces 17, and that is the Easter promenade. So this weekend, when we have Venus and Saturn squaring off against each other, well, there is a bit of against each other. They can work together, but they're not that happy together. You know, Venus is also on an Easter degree, the Easter promenade. So Saturn on 17 degrees of Sagittarius, that Sabian symbol is the Easter sunrise service that draws a large crowd, and the Venus is on the Easter promenade degree, which is Pisces 17. So Sagittarius 17 and Pisces 17 exactly square each other, and both Easter degrees, and both highlighted this weekend on Easter weekend. I mean, there's just, that is amazing. It's like some huge synchronistically amazing thing. And so I'm finding that interesting to look at. At the same time, highlighting the whole idea is Jupiter on Virgo 17, which is it's a volcanic eruption. So the volcanic eruption is a really interesting one. I actually like it, but why I sort of went is because, you know, we've got Jupiter is squaring Venus, and Saturn is squaring Venus, and Jupiter and Saturn are in opposite degrees, and that's exact this weekend. And so it's all pretty mind-boggling. And so Jupiter's on the volcanic eruption. It brings dust clouds and flowing lava and earth rumblings. I think it was Mark Evan Jones who put it that way, that symbol that way, because various authors have changed the symbols a little bit, but that's the way Mark Evan Jones wrote it, I think. Anyway, so it's very much about, you know, things bubbling up from the subconscious. It's things about being released. It can be like an explosion of energy. You know, in fact, you know, with Jupiter on this degree, that could explain partly. Of course, it's not going to explain the whole thing, but the terrible bombings in Belgium the other day was shocking. So that's the volcanic eruption too. But we all have our own styles of volcanic eruption, and we're not all going to go terrorist. But Yes, but in terms of this weekend, what we're really looking at, I think, is deciding what we want to keep in our lives and what we want to let go of. And with the major thing to me is the Saturn Venus square. Of course, Jupiter's playing into that. And Jupiter can be pulling us, and of course, Jupiter rules Sagittarius, which is where Saturn is, and Saturn and Jupiter are opposite each other. So yeah, it's all pretty amazing. So. Truly, I think this weekend can bring up issues to do with family, definitely. Saturn Venus square can have us realizing how we haven't, if we haven't, how we haven't had time with our community, that feeling of hope and joy and sharing. All of those things might be missing from our lives. We might be feeling lonely. That can happen with Saturn Venus. Can be quite strong. It can be that we're in a relationship and we don't share the same ideals, the same thoughts, or we don't have the same vision about the future. That can be there. There can be worries about money. But on the other hand, of course, what will happen to some people this weekend is that with the Saturn Venus square is that through this sense of resurrection and joy and community spirit, we can realize that in some relationships that we have where we might have thought we were going to break up, or we felt like it was, a losing situation, they can really be resurrected, and people can find common ground regardless of their differences. That can happen with this. Another thing that can happen is people can decide to get married. I mean, Saturn Venus can do that. They can, make commitments to each other, which is really wonderful, of course. And but it's an interesting thing, having this Venus and Jupiter opposite each other. There's this real feeling of expansion, the wanting to expand and really take on more, maybe go traveling or make big plans for the future, or, looking at our credit card statements and, being freaked out by how much we've already spent. We could also be looking at ourselves and going, I could lose a few pounds or a few kilos. That can be part of that Venus-Jupiter thing as well. But the wonderful expression of community can really come through if we drop our differences, and I think the way to really manifest that is partly through the belief in the resurrection of hope. For myself, I'm not particularly religious. In fact, not religious at all. In fact, I don't mind calling myself a heretic. But when I say that, I really believe that God is the spirit that's within us, and I can see, the beauty of Jesus. And of course, Good Friday is about the celebration of all of that, the resurrection, and the going on the cross, all of that stuff. Excuse me. So. Excuse me, letting love in. It's interesting that I coughed right on that. Letting love in this weekend can be, really quite an interesting challenge for many people. I mean, on some levels, of course, as I've already said, people will be seeing family, they'll be seeing old friends, because Easter is a bit of a time for reunions or just gathering together with family, or having a barbecue or something along those lines, But this weekend in particular, it's rather interesting because we have Mars slowing right down in Sagittarius before it's going to go retrograde, which it does very soon. But it's about to move on to this weekend. It moves on to Cupid knocking at the door of a human heart. So this is really interesting in terms of the things I've just said. Mars on Cupid knocking on the door of a human heart. It's sort of like, oh, knock, 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 are you there? And of course, sometimes it's knock, knock, and that you don't want people to come. Sometimes it's knock, and it's sort of like, oh, I've been waiting for you, for a long time. And it can be a real challenge sometimes also to open one's heart, especially if one's been alone for a long time or, are set in their ways. And Mars and Sagittarius can show that, of course, but anyway, the Mars is going this weekend, and it will be on it from I think Saturday right through to about Wednesday of this week. It's on Cupid knocking at the door of a human heart. It was really funny because this is my second take on this. on this video, and I haven't got the pause button on my software, so I had to stop, and it was somebody knocking on the door, was bringing me some money for a book that they bought. So that was really funny because I was just getting to the Cupid knocking on the door of a human heart, and somebody knocked on the door, and I had to stop it, and then I had to start this recording again. I love the way the Sabians work. They're so magic, and they're so magic in so many ways. And it's just amazing. We've just gone into Aries. Of course, that's what we we do at this time of year, and one of the issues of the last couple of days has been, could have been for many people a sense of being quite lonely, even in a relationship that can come up. The Sun and Mercury were on Thursday, the day before Good Friday, on two lovers are strolling through a secluded walk. It was earlier in the day, Thursday, really, for those in America. In Australia, we're ahead by about 16 hours. But anyway, we won't worry about the timing of it because this is the idea. We're going into this Easter weekend with the two lovers strolling on a secluded walk. Mercury and the Sun have been on this degree, and so this can really bring up the idea of, are you alone? Do you spend too much time alone? Have you got a relationship? Do you spend too much time just in that relationship, or would you like to spend more time, just with your loved one? It's an interesting question. Even though it's two lovers are strolling through a secluded walk, this Aries 4, I've seen it many times in the charts. People have been alone for a long time. And I think that, part of the message of the Sabian Symbols for this weekend is to believe in the resurrection of the idea of being loved, or having love in your life, or having love show up for you. Interesting, my throat's doing it again. Excuse me. It's an interesting one. It's like, how do we instigate that? Well, of course, we put out the request, and sometimes, often the request will show up in one way or another. We have to make it clear the intentions that we want to have love in our lives. And there's many rules and laws that are showing up from our past, and Chiron, which is very much the wounded healer, but it also, I see it as the stories that we tell ourselves. Chiron is conjunct the South Node at the moment, and that's major, and I've been talking about that a fair bit in my blogs and my newsletters and on my website and on Facebook. And so, Chiron conjunct the South Node is on Pisces 22, and that is a prophet bringing down the new law from the mountain. What I think this means for us is we have to change the stories of where we came from. In fact, I don't think that the stories of where we came from are that important anymore. It's more about the stories of where we're going. Well, I think we just need to drop the story in general and take one day at a time. That's part of, I've been saying that really quite a lot lately. At the moment, it feels to me like one day at a time. Doesn't mean we can't plan for the future. It's just that we remain in the present, and I think that is a really good way to not indulge in the laws of the past, the laws that no longer apply to us. It is even more interesting that it's Easter this weekend and we've got Chiron conjunct the South Node on the prophet bringing down the new law from the mountain, because, in the biblical sense, that's the 10 Commandments. But quite apart from the 10 Commandments, although a lot of people, there's a number of people on the planet who live by those, and most of them, I think that they're just about all good rules to live by, although I think some of them are probably rather strange, but that was then and this is now. What are the rules that we want to instigate into our life? What rules do we want to drop? I think it's more about dropping laws and dropping rules that stop us from being more intrinsically who we're meant to be. So what do I mean by that? I mean that when we listen to the stories we tell ourselves that tell us limiting stories, or stories of neglect or loss or the past or the pain or the wound, part of the deal there is to drop that. That's why Chiron is on the South Node at the moment. The South Node is very much about where we come from. It can be what we've brought into this life. It can be what we're really good at, what we've learned, what we need to drop. Mostly, I think it's about what we need to drop, because we can integrate the good bits of it. We don't need to keep following the rules of the old bits that don't work for us anymore. I think that's a big part of it. Chiron very soon is going to move on to the materializing medium, giving a seance. And I think with this, we're really learning to integrate the things that we're hearing, to really listen to our intuition, to really take things in and tune into our intuitive, clairvoyant psychic minds. I think that's part of the deal with Chiron's movement very soon onto this next degree. But right now and through the weekend, Chiron's on the Chiron and the South Node on the Prophet, bringing down the new law from the mountain. Excuse me. So, we can see laws being enacted all over the world that we're not very happy with. I mean, that's happening quite a lot too. But more than that, it's the laws that we confine ourselves to. They've just got to go. And so really good when we listen to the stories we tell ourselves. If there's some negative story that's running through our minds, we might want to take a good look at that. Or maybe we've looked at it for years and we don't need to look at it anymore and we can just let it drop. I find that works really well for myself. Sometimes I think, oh, I should do this, or I have to do this, or, I've got to get to this thing. And then I just go, no, take the charge out of it. No more charge. And it's working very well. One needs to remember one's duties, obviously, with things that one should do. But, being hard on oneself is not going to work. And this weekend, talk about push me, pull you, tug of war with the, Venus opposing Jupiter. And, Venus square Saturn, Saturn squaring Jupiter. It's like, the whole thing's rather lit up with, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. But I think we really need to go towards that Jupiter. As long as we've got our ducks in the row and we've done the work we need to do, and I mean that loosely. I don't mean following the laws and the rules. I mean done the work on ourselves. I don't even know what that means. I mean, I think that means people are doing a lot of work on themselves, but I think sometimes we just need to drop the story and it can happen really fast. That's part of the way I look at it. But anyway, regardless, if we feel that we're in a position where, we feel like we've tidied up a lot of our karmic loose ends, or even if we feel like we haven't, I think it can be time where we can just go, right, put those to one side. We're just going to, go with the more hopeful, optimistic expression of Jupiter. And Jupiter is conjunct the North Node. And so Jupiter conjunct the North Node is more of that energy of where we're meant to be heading towards. It's not that we're leaving Saturn. We can take plenty of notice of Saturn. We just don't have to indulge in it too much. There will be relationship breakups this weekend. I guess they're always going on, but Saturn and Venus square, that's a pretty big indicator of, no, sorry, I'm not going there anymore. I'm not doing that. I need my freedom, can be part of that. Or it could be, this person as my partner gives me so much freedom that I'm willing to commit to being in this relationship even more than I did before. That can come up as well. It's really how people are interacting with each other. I think that, the North Node on the 22nd degree of Virgo, it's on the royal coat of arms. It's enriched with precious jewels or gems. And so, the point of this really is to remember our sense of self, to remember our sense of, I'm going to say it, royalty, even though that's a bit of a strange thing to say, I think. But I'm not into royalty, but I am into the royal sense of oneself. I think that's a really good thing to embody. And it's to remember where we come from in a true sense, regardless of our history, to remember where, our true sense of self, our true sense of good self. I think that's part of the deal. The royal coat of arms enriched with precious stones, we can, doesn't matter about our heritage, doesn't matter how much money we have or what we've attained in our life or what our relationship status is or any of that. None of that matters. That North Node is saying to stick with our sense of self and have, and see the beauty and the worth within ourselves regardless, which we might lose sight of a little bit, with Saturn sitting on this degree squaring Venus and squaring Jupiter. There can be, because Saturn is the focal point of the T-square, that brings a little bit more stress to that idea. But that's okay because I really think, Saturn can bring us great rewards. It's I know we talk about it as being, the Lord of Karma and the hard taskmaster, but it can bring us great rewards if we've put in the effort, So, anyway, I think that's, all pretty amazing. The most amazing part of it for me is the fact that Saturn's on an Easter degree. Venus is exactly square it on another Easter degree. Quite extraordinary this Easter to be having that. And to be going into the weekend, with the idea of the two lovers on a secluded walk. That's the entrance to this weekend, more or less, is that. Just refer to my book. I do mostly do the symbols completely just off the top of my head, but and I do know them all. But anyway, so Mercury and Venus are, Mercury and the Sun are moving on to Aries 5, which is the white triangle is seen. It has golden wings. And so there's a hint here of how to rise above the difficulties that we might be experiencing, or to rise above caring about, having to worry about this, that, or the other. It can be like, we can realize that it's a public holiday and we should have some time off. But the white triangle is seen, it has golden wings, allows us to rise up above situations of beautiful degree of transcendence. It's Aries 5. It's Aries 4 in the zodiac. So the white triangle is seen, it has golden wings, that implies that we rise above situations, that the triangle is, it's about integration and it's about lifting up above situations, and so that we're not at the mercy of them. And through our imagination, we can do that. And it's not escapism. I don't see it as escapism, although that can be inherent in that degree. I think it's about honoring ourselves again and rising up above. And then, like on the weekend, this Mercury goes ahead of the Sun, but they both go over the square brightly lighted on one side. And this is interesting because I think when that Venus comes up to that square to Saturn, which happens this weekend around this time, the idea is to see a way out of any limitations. The square brightly lighted on one side of the Sun and Mercury, which will be on this degree this weekend, as I've already said, is to see that there is an out. The square is brightly lit on one side, and that is so interesting when we've got a T-square between Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. The symbology of that is pretty extraordinary. On the weekend also, the Sun and Mercury will go over Aries 7, which is a man successfully expressing himself in two worlds at once. And sometimes we'll, and I think that that's even more, an expression of this Jupiter-Saturn square, especially as Venus is moving right into it on the weekend on Saturday. I think it's Saturday it moves in exact, or Sunday. Doesn't matter. It's there, and it's going to be a major motif this weekend. But it's really great because I think that this weekend, right into Monday, the Sun moves on to a seer gazes intently into a crystal ball before him, which is Aries 9. And this talks about really looking at your situation in terms of how you want to change it, what you want to do, or being observant of the signs around you. I think that is a big part of it. But what can happen with the seer gazes intently into a crystal ball before him? Realizations can just pop into your mind. It doesn't have to be that you stare intently at your situation. It can be where you ask for the messages to come, and they just come. They will come. I think this weekend's one of those. And then, by the end of the weekend, and I'm being very ballpark about this, but, we're going to have Aries 10 around, and that might be just after Easter Monday. It doesn't matter, but it's coming up, and that's a teacher gives new symbolic forms to traditional images. And this is where we rewrite the laws, where we rewrite the story. So, all these energies are unfolding as we go into next week. Another degree that's really amazing is Aries 11. Well, they're all amazing degrees, but, it really tells this story. And Aries 11, meaning 10 plus in the zodiac, the Sabian symbol for that is the president of the republic or the ruler of one's country. So the Sun will be going over that. I think Mercury will have already gone ahead. Yes, it will. So Mercury will have, gone ahead of that. But it might be talking about the US presidential elections. There might be something really big with this volcanic eruption with Saturn and Venus square. They might be upset about what happened in Arizona or whatever, with the voting and all that. But, more than that, I think that the ruler of one's country is talking to us and saying, what do you want in your future? Where do you want to go? Like, how are you going to take control more of your life? Are you in control of your life? Sometimes we're not. And I think that this weekend is going to show us where we need to take, not so much take control, but to see what is working and what is not working, and to let go of some of the things, let go of the things that aren't working. Of course, we don't let go of everything at once. That might cause a huge catastrophe and a volcanic eruption, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But, we might go through our closets. We might go, I don't need all these clothes anymore. I haven't worn them in 5 years. We might go into our garage and throw out, the 15 tennis rackets when we've never played tennis in our entire life. We might, we might say to our partner, we need to have a break. We might say to our partner, it's finished. We might say I'd like to go into more commitment with you. I mean, who knows? But it's all going to be very much about, you know, looking at what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep this weekend. And I think it's, it's extraordinary. It's amazing. It's wonderful. And yeah, and the thing is to remember that, we have a path that we're meant to be on. I mean, it doesn't matter if we remember it, we don't remember. But Neptune's asking us to remember it. And Neptune's on the 11th degree of Pisces. And the Sabian symbol for that is people traveling a narrow path seeking illumination. And so I think the message of Neptune on the 11th degree of Pisces is to continue on our path. To see our path as worthy. And it might be that we need to examine our path, because we might be saying to ourselves, oh, do I enjoy this relationship? Am I enjoying this job? Am I enjoying all this stuff in the garage? It's like, on that narrow path, do you need so many things to take with you on the narrow path? We don't have to be alone on our path. We can be with others. It might be a narrow path, but in the narrow path part of it just talks about the fact that there's a destination, there's a journey, to be on. Yeah, Neptune in Pisces, it's a very interesting time. Uranus is on an interesting degree. There's been, in terms of politics, it's there's been a lot of talk about socialism in the United States, and people, I think, are confusing that with communism. Anyway, I don't want to get involved in political stories here, but Uranus has been sitting for some time, and it did this last year as well, on the young person feeding birds in winter. And, this can be very much, we're seeing people in, the refugees in Europe that are in, they're in very cold circumstances, some of them living in mud, and there can be relief agencies and all that sort of stuff. There can be people arguing that they don't want their tax dollar going to that. There's all this stuff going on is what I'm implying. And the young girl feeding birds in winter, that's very much about looking after those that can't look after themselves. They might have got into a situation that's really removed from their normal environment. And this can be about the homeless in America, the homeless in Australia, the homeless anywhere. It can be about the downtrodden. It can be about those who don't have enough food or the money to pay for their bills. Uranus is on that degree. And I think we've been seeing a lot of conversations about that. Where it gets really interesting, and I do have to look it up even though I know, is that Uranus moves on to the next degree. Yes, right at the beginning of April. It's almost like April Fool's Day. It is actually, but anyway, without splitting hairs, Uranus is going on to the boxer entering the ring, and I find this to be incredible in terms of, but in particular in terms of the US presidential race. It's on that degree for quite a long time. It's right through April. Well, until it's through to just about the last week of April. We're on the boxer entering the ring, and Uranus was stationary on this degree of the boxer entering the ring for 2 months of last year, and it was right around that time people were throwing their hats in the ring for the US presidential race. And we can see the boxer entering the ring in so many things around us. I have been seeing it really a lot, even when Uranus had moved off that degree, it was still showing up. I'm sure that you've been seeing it too. I mean, Donald Trump, all that, the fighting, the infighting, the arguments, the insults, the wearing of the heavyweight belt, it's all there as a motif, as a archetype. And then, like towards the end of April, Uranus will go on to the gate to the garden of all fulfilled desires, and it almost got to that last year, but it didn't quite, and it went retrograde on the boxer entering the ring. But going on to the gate to the garden of all fulfilled desires, I mean, if that's not the White House when you're talking about US politics, which I don't want to talk about too much, but I seem to be still. But the gate to the garden of all fulfilled desire is very much the White House, like, the people vying to get into the White House. It's very interesting. But of course, we have our own gate to the garden of all fulfilled desire. And the message that's coming up, this is over the next few months, but I want to share this with you, even though I'm sort of concentrating on Easter a bit in this. But what I'm saying here is that I see that Aries 20, which is 19 plus in the zodiac, and Aries 21, I see them as a binary. There's a number of them in the Sabian symbol that I've identified as being like a binary. They just seem to go together. The boxer entering the ring, is where we step up to the plate. And that can be where we say, you know what, I've wanted to do a blog for years, I'm going to do it now. It can be where we go, oh, I've wanted to move right away from where I live and I'm going to do it now. It can be where we say, I'm going to take on that job, even though I wasn't sure if I had the qualifications, but they said that they're going to hire me. I'm going to do it now. It's the stepping up to the plate. And yes, we do need to feel that we are, qualified for that in some measure, but I don't think we have to have, the usual qualifications. This is Uranus that we're talking about. So the boxer entering the ring talks about trying your luck, stepping up to the plate and being prepared to take things on. And then when we go to the gate to the garden of all fulfilled desire, which is just in a month's time. It's less than a month, isn't it? It's about a month's time. But yeah, about 3.5 weeks' time. That's very much about stepping through the gate. And I see these two together, the boxer and the garden, are about stepping up to the plate and stepping through the gate. And sometimes we have to decide where we want to be and what gate we want to step through. And sometimes, we might find ourselves going, oh no, I can't take on the battle, and that's okay, except if we miss the opportunity to step up to the plate, we may regret it later. Well, I don't want to put that out there, but who knows? There can be that. And then, stepping through the gate, it's like really stepping up to what we really want in life. What is it? Where do you want to be? Where is the gate to the garden of all your fulfilled desires? And sometimes that's just a mindset. Sometimes that's where we go, no, I don't have to go anywhere or take on any job. I don't have to do anything with my relationships. I have to just realize that I have the gate to all fulfilled desires. I really like these 2 degrees, and I've been looking at these two coming up together, as Uranus goes onto the gate to the garden of all fulfilled desire. I really do feel that many people are going to be analysing, where it is that they want to be. I think it's very fabulous. So, Jupiter's retrograde, Saturn's going retrograde now. Saturn is stationary and just about to go retrograde. Well, it is going retrograde. So that's interesting as well. It's sort of like, those things that we really wanted to push forward with, might take a little bit of time to come to fruition. As I say that, though, sometimes we decide we want something and we just make it happen. We just have to decide we want it to happen and it just happens. Anyway, is there anything else? Well, there's always more. There's always more. Mars is going to go retrograde. That's going to be very interesting. When does Mars go retrograde? I do know, but when I do these things, my mind goes off somewhere else. My left brain goes out the window a little bit. Anyway, the 17th of April, Mars goes retrograde, and it goes retrograde on the 9th degree of Sagittarius, which can really talk. It's the Sabian symbol for that is a mother leading her young child step by step up the stairs. And this can be about guiding others or feeling like you're being guided or knowing what steps you have to take to get to somewhere. It can feel like you have to look after your parents. It can be the younger looking after the older, or it can be the older looking after the younger. But in general, it's about being a guide. And, we do that in many different ways. And so it goes retrograde and it goes back over the Cupid knocking at the door of a human heart. That's the degree that's around at the beginning of May for about 3 or 4 days or 5 days or something. So Mars is retrograde until the end of June, and it's very interesting. It goes direct on the 29th of June, and I am jumping ahead in here a little bit, but I think this is very interesting because Mars goes direct in Scorpio on the 24th degree of Scorpio. So Scorpio 24 in the Sabian symbols is crowds coming down the mountain to listen to one inspired individual. Now, they don't really have to be inspired. They don't even have to be crowds. I mean, when you look at a symbol, sometimes it talks about one person, climbing the mountain to listen to the wind. It's got many different ramifications, of course, as all the symbols do. But I see this very much, Mars going direct on the crowds coming down the mountain to listen to one inspired individual has definitely got to be listening to politics. It's interesting because I see Scorpio 24 very often It's not always, of course, but I see it very often as the President of the United States or, the Prime Minister of Australia or whatever. But the President of the United States is one of the biggest offices in the entire land. And I really do see that degree, the crowds coming down the mountain to listen to one inspired individual as being that, the office of the President of the United States. I have to add that it's just 1 degree off Trump's IC, the bottom of his chart. He's got that really highly accented in his chart, the crowds coming down the mountain to listen to one inspired individual. Now, with the symbol, he doesn't, I'm not saying Trump's inspired, and I don't want to say what I think about him here. I say enough about that on Facebook, but, it's just, well, I think it's a joke. But anyway, but this is going to really set it off. There's going to be so much of Mars on that degree. Can you imagine the amount of voices, the amount of listening, the amount of not wanting to listen? It's going to be a very interesting time. Anyway, I have jumped ahead from Easter, but this is going to be an interesting weekend, and I wish you lots of luck with the push me, pull you. It can be like, well, do we do this? Oh, no, I don't do it. Oh, am I over here? The push me, pull you is a very interesting thing. But Jupiter, I think, has the upper hand. I really do. I know that Saturn normally wins I would think. I mean, I'm being a bit silly, a bit flippant here, but, Saturn, is the one that can go on Jupiter any moment. But I think that, with Jupiter conjunct the moon's north node, that is the direction we need to go in. So with the volcanic eruptions happening, listen to what's coming up from your gut. You might burp. Worse things could happen, but you listen to your I don't want worse things to happen. Listen to your inner promptings. Listen to those things that come up for you. With the volcanic eruption, there could be really big explosions where people have been holding their thoughts in for so long that they're ready for them to come out now, especially with Venus opposing Jupiter, because they can really turn into the loud mouth. So there's a balance here between keeping things to yourself and thinking things through and being judicious and letting things out and going on the fly and speaking your truth. I mean, there's real balance between that this weekend, and I think it's fabulous. I think it's a great challenge. Just, I think, let go of some of those laws, some of those rules. Bleh. Who needs them? We don't. Bye.